Hello, friends, and welcome back to Scaling Stories. Today, I've got some more highly upvoted posts from Best of Redditor updates for y'all. Like always, I'll be reading you the posts and giving you my opinions, and I'll also be working on building up my Minecraft world at the same time, so I hope you enjoy. Also, I'm currently only in Spotify's creator program, so watching on there would help me out a ton. Thank you so much for your support. Today's first story comes from the Am I the Jerk subreddit. It was posted by Saltylikeapretzel on March 26, 2026, and was titled, Am I the Jerk for Getting Pregnant Without Considering My Roommate's Feelings? I'm living with a friend in a 2-bedroom apartment in a major city. Separate bathrooms. She also lives in the master, and we split rent evenly. I have a long-distance partner, and I recently discovered I am pregnant, very early on. The current lease we are in ends on June 30th, and I asked my friend/roommate if she would be down to do a month-to-month lease for a few months after our lease ends, until I get close to my due date, and then I would move in with my parents. My parents live in another major city that is about a 3-hour commute from my workplace, where I work in person twice a week. So, understandably, I wouldn't want to be doing this commute for longer than I have to. My roommate said she did not want to do month-to-month, and I said that was fine. I would just move down in July when our lease is up. Today, my roommate informed me that she is not comfortable living with me until our lease ends because she did not sign up to be responsible for someone who is pregnant or trying to start a family, and therefore, I needed to pay to break our lease so she wouldn't have to live with me for the next 3 months. I asked in what way me sharing a wall with her for the 3 months, as per our lease, would impact her in any way, given that I have not asked her for any support in my pregnancy so far. She said that it did not matter that I was not relying on her for support because she had to advocate for herself, and she didn't want the responsibility of living with someone who is pregnant because what if something goes wrong? She also mentioned the possibility of my mom or a friend taking me to appointments and therefore forcing her to be a part of this. She said she was very upset that I had not considered her feelings and what she was forced to be a part of when getting pregnant, and that it was my responsibility to pay for all the costs associated with breaking the lease early, as I am the one who changed the terms of us living together. To be clear, I am not, nor have I ever, asked her to live with me close to my delivery or after I give birth, just to end our lease on June 30th, at which point I would be 4 months pregnant. She said this was an unfair and selfish ask of me, and she was disappointed that I didn't have the capacity to put myself in her position and think about how my pregnancy would affect her. She does have previous trauma relating to a pregnancy that did not end up going to term, to be fair. I told her I was okay with never mentioning my pregnancy to her or asking anything of her, but she insists that it is unfair of me to ask that we finish our lease through June 30th because I will still be pregnant, and it will be so hard for me to move in June. So, therefore, I have to pay thousands of dollars to break the lease early. Am I the jerk for asking to finish out this lease for the next 3 months and forcing my roommate to coexist with me while I'm in early pregnancy, given I did not consider how this would affect her and the potential liability she would have if I live with her while pregnant? Alternatively, am I the jerk here for asking that we split the costs of breaking the lease, given she is the one that no longer wants to live with me? Scaling Stories Corner. Nah, I think OP's friend is just trying to make things difficult for OP because she's pregnant and the friend is triggered due to her past pregnancy that failed. Which, you know what? That's valid. You're allowed to feel triggered because you have intense emotions around pregnancy and the things related to it. But that doesn't give you the right to demand someone else to fork out thousands of dollars to kick themselves out for a problem that you have. You know, you both agreed on a lease, and it most definitely didn't have the terms that people aren't allowed to get pregnant while living in this apartment. So it kind of sucks to suck. If this is affecting OP's friend this badly, you might as well save the money you're going to use to break the lease and get yourself into therapy. Now here are some of the top/relevant comments from the original post. Commenter 1 says, her not wanting to do month to month after the lease is up is totally fair. Her thinking you needed to factor her emotions and wants into your pregnancy is way out of bounds. Definitely not the jerk. She wants the lease broken, then she can pay to do it. OP says, thank you. I agree. Maybe I shouldn't have asked if she wanted to do month to month. For clarity, I imagined extending the lease by 2 months or so, not all the way up to my due date in late November. But as soon as she said no, I completely respected that and assured her I'd made my own arrangements once our lease ended. OP says to another commenter, "Thank you. Prior to literally yesterday, I was close friends with my roommate. I did know about her trauma and have routinely been a listening ear and validated her feelings surrounding what happened. I won't go into more detail about her trauma because it's not my story to tell, but it's something we have discussed extensively beforehand. I definitely feel bad that I triggered her by accidentally getting pregnant, but I was shocked that someone whom I considered a friend could be so callous and self-centered and unsupportive during a time that she, better than anyone, would understand is so difficult to navigate already, without the added stress of housing instability. Before yesterday, I loved her very much and felt and showed a lot of empathy for her and tried to accommodate her many traumas in our living situation. For example, she has a reactive dog that she refuses to actively train. Prior to moving in, I expressed my own desire to get a dog in the wake of losing my soul dog last year. She assured me she would need time to get settled, but that this would be fine. When I brought up getting a dog 2 months into living together, she immediately said she would move out because she could not deal with the anxiety of having her reactive dog around another dog all the time. I offered to pay for training myself, and she refused, insisting her anxieties would not be eased by a professional dog trainer, so I accepted it and never brought up the dog again. I'm willing to work with people's, especially my friends, mental illness and traumas, but what she demanded I do in this situation felt beyond the pale. OP says to another commenter, she's been in therapy for most of her adult life, and her mom is a mental health professional, which makes this all the more baffling. Commenter 3 says, not the jerk, but where is your partner in all this? Why would you move in with your parents and not your partner you're pregnant with? Commenter 4 says, yeah, it doesn't sound like he wants this baby. OP says, he very much does. He'll be telling his parents this weekend. Smiley face. I just didn't mention this all in the post as I didn't feel it was relevant. OP says to another commenter, my partner is very supportive, but unfortunately has legal/other ties to a different state, which makes moving immediately financially impossible. I cannot move to be with him, as my job requires me to be in person twice a week, and without doxing myself entirely, my job depends on a license, which I only have in my current state, not my partner's. It's not possible for me to up and move to him either, as I would be unable to get a job in his state. Thankfully, he's worked it out with his employer and his school to where we will be living together post-baby/in late pregnancy. Update 3 months, 1 week later. Now that my lease has ended, I thought an update was warranted. First, a little more background on my roommate. She and I were friends for about a year before we decided to live together. The pregnancy-related trauma I mentioned in my earlier post was her getting an abortion 2 years ago because she decided she did not want to have a child with her fiancé at the time, as he was verbally abusive and got her pregnant without her consent. She was open about this happening. She told me about her abortion the literal day that I met her. We also had a mutual friend who was trying to conceive with her husband at the time I got pregnant. This mutual friend would openly talk about her attempts to get pregnant, including a miscarriage, with my roommate, and my roommate appeared to have zero issues discussing these topics with her and remaining this person's friend. Now, onto what happened next. I took the advice of a lot of you, and my IRL friends, and told my roommate via text, to have it in writing, that I would not be leaving the apartment until our lease ended June 30th. I told her that if she felt uncomfortable, that was on her to manage, and she was welcome to make arrangements with the landlord. In response, she said, thumbs up emoji, which viewers of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City will recognize as a Gen Z FU. After I stood my ground, things at the apartment were tense. I spoke to her in person only once more, when I asked if she would move her car so I could put our trash bins out. She said she would do it and then didn't, leaving me to scramble to get the bins out in time the next morning. She also routinely had guests over, in particular, one former friend of mine that I had a falling out with, unrelated to roommate, to antagonize me. She also replaced all the pictures of us in the apartment with pictures of her and this former friend. I'll admit that I was petty too. I took my microwave and toaster out of the kitchen and put up a single ultrasound picture in a common area, but I removed it after 2 days since I felt bad. In general, though, I stayed in my room 99% of the time I was in the apartment and did not see or speak to her again after early April. I completely stopped using the kitchen and common areas. Even when I had my mom visit, she and I would spend all our time locked in my room. Unexpectedly and without telling me, my roommate moved out on May 8th. She took several of my things, blocked me in the driveway for hours, and refused to reimburse me for the couch we had bought together and utilities she still owed me. When I asked her to reimburse me for these things over text, she said that she would not be paying me anything because I had bullied her out of the house and had been hostile to her friends so they could not come over. These texts were a little concerning because, again, I had not even spoken to her in over a month at this point. I had never asked her not to bring certain people over and did not consider my taking the microwave and toaster away bullying, any more than I considered her putting up photos of a person I disliked all over our apartment bullying. Regardless, I thought I was finally free and was willing to lose the $5,000 I paid for the couch and the hundreds she still owed me in utilities if it meant she was out of my life. Despite taking several things that belonged to me, she was kind enough to leave her side of the fridge full of rotten food, leave trash strewn all over her old room, leave unpatched holes in the wall, and leave a cabinet her dog had chewed up unrepaired. Surprisingly, she paid rent for the month of June. Prior to her moving out and this conflict arising, another mutual friend, though he was primarily my friend, to be fair, had asked if he could stay with us on and off for the month of June while he completed a residency for his physician's assistant program in our city. Both of us had said yes and planned to let him stay in our spare room. After roommate moved out and had been out for over a month, my friend came to stay. Since my roommate had had the master bed/bath and paid the same as me in rent, by the way, I set up an air mattress in her old room as well as a desk. The spare room was on the other end of the apartment from the bathrooms and was adjacent to the kitchen, so I thought setting him up in my roommate's old room made more sense and gave him more privacy. As he was a guest, I didn't charge him any rent or utilities, just let him stay because I appreciated the company. 2 weeks before our lease ended and well over a month after she had moved out, my roommate and her dad used a spare key to re-enter the apartment. My friend was there at the time, but I wasn't. She told my friend she and her dad were there to patch holes in the wall, but left after only a few minutes without making any effort to repair the property damage she and her dog had caused. Instead, she sent an email to the landlord alleging that I was violating our lease by illegally subletting her room and demanding that I reimburse her for rent. My landlord was thankfully a rational person who also thought my roommate was crazy and told her that any dispute was between the two of us and he would not be reimbursing her for rent. Shortly after the landlord politely told her to get effed, she emailed me, CCing her parents. She is a 28-year-old practicing attorney, by the way, alleging that I had violated the lease, that she had it on good authority, that I had multiple people living with me for months, that my friend visiting was trespassing/squatting and was at the apartment illegally, and that if I did not reimburse her for her rent for the months of May and June, she would be escalating the matter. Unfortunately for her, I too am an attorney who evidently paid much more attention in torts and property class than she did. I read through the lease and saw that it did not proscribe guests, but it did limit occupancy to 2 adults, not leasees, at one time. A violation of this portion of the lease entitled the landlord to raise the rent, but did not entitle the co-leasees to any liquidated damages for the breach. I wrote her a very strongly worded email in which I detailed that I had not broken our lease. She had suffered no damages. My friend was not trespassing nor squatting as he had my permission to be there, and I was a co-tenant that had the right to possess the entirety of the property, and that I would therefore not be reimbursing her for absolutely anything. I also included texts of her agreeing to reimburse me for the couch, admitting that her dog had destroyed the property, and giving me permission, though, again, this was not necessary, to have guests, including my friend in question, over any time. Finally, I defined reproductive coercion and abuse for her and told her that her actions were essentially an attempt to coerce me into an abortion and then abusing me financially when I refused to terminate the pregnancy at her request. I told her to not contact me again and that she was welcome to take me to small claims court and explain to a judge why she had moved out early. If she did so, I would be countersuing her for her unpaid utilities and the couch. Since then, she's been silent. I moved out last weekend and asked the landlord to split out the deposit in half, which he agreed to. My pregnancy is progressing well, and I'm nearly halfway through, and it seems like this saga is finally over. Fingers crossed. Scaling Stories Corner. Jesus Christ, yikes on bikes. I am surprised that OP's roommate is the one that ended up moving out. because she was actually so unhinged that I was afraid she was going to try and do something like poison OP to like try and get rid of her baby or something. I don't know. Maybe that thought is a little crazy, but like we're on Reddit, right? I've seen crazier. I think. But for the most part, I think OP did pretty good here. She knew her rights and stood her ground when her crazy roommate tried to scam her. But I think if I were OP, I would have just called the police when she stole the couch and other stuff and wouldn't return it. Because like, what does that look like for me? The cops show up and take my statement and then they go to the roommate and try to talk to her? Like, worst case scenario, I don't get my stuff back, right? And I already don't have my stuff back. But best case scenario, I get my stuff back? So it sounds pretty good to me. Now, here are some of the top/relevant comments from the update post. Commenter 1 says, "She's an idiot and you are too nice. I would have taken the entire deposit, her part being reimbursement for unpaid utilities and the couch, since you had evidence of these debts." OP says, "I truly considered asking the landlord to just send the deposit to me and keeping it all. But I'm honestly a little afraid of her because she doesn't seem to be in touch with reality, and I didn't know what she might do in revenge for me stealing from her." Commenter 2 says, "You should have kept it as reimbursement for cleaning up the mess she left behind. I bet you documented everything, so you could have argued that the deposit was your payment for cleanup and repairs." OP says, "I wanted to, but I was, and to some degree still am, afraid of her and don't want to take this to small claims court. I'm confident I would win, but I don't want to see her ever again, and having her leave me alone forever is honestly worth every penny." Commenter 3 says, "No damage deduction for the holes made by your ex-roommate?" OP says, "Doesn't seem like it. My mom and I patched the holes and the cabinet and repainted the patches before I moved out." Commenter 4 says, please tell me, when you replied to her email, you replied all so her parents can see what she is doing. Please tell me you did that." OP says, "Oh, I replied all to that mother effer. Hope her parents got a wake-up call, but I doubt it, since they raised her to be this entitled." Commenter 5 says, "Hell yeah. My other question is this. Did she ever show any other behaviors to suggest she was into you romantically? This reads like an incel who throws a fit because the barista he thought was into him has a boyfriend." OP says, "You aren't the first person to mention that. I never got the sense that she was into me romantically, but she did treat me very differently to her other female friends. She often told me I was a safe person for her and often expected me, or outright told me, to suppress my own needs and wants because hers were more important or her mental health was worse. Looking back, I think it was just a toxic relationship, and she felt like she had the right to control my behavior. When I stood up to her by refusing to move out, it was like she'd suffered the biggest betrayal ever because I think she really expected me to apologize for getting pregnant without considering her feelings and move out, shouldering all the expenses without question." OP says in a later comment, "You're right on the money. She labeled my partner as abusive and would often tell me stories about things my partner had done that were entirely untrue, exaggerated, or made up. When I would tell her she was wrong, she'd insist that I had told her these, often outright lies, things about my partner. For example, I confided in her that once, in our over 3 years of dating, he told me, F you, during an argument, something I agree is unacceptable behavior, and which he has only done the one time. After learning this, she told me he was not allowed in the apartment because he triggered her, comparing him to exes that had sexually and physically assaulted her and tried to kill her. As we're long distance, that meant I had to pay for a hotel anytime he visited. I pushed back on this, and she told me she had decided I had a right to have him visit, but that I had to constantly text her updates of where we were so she would never have to look him in the face. I once asked her if my partner ever did something to her to make her feel uncomfortable or afraid, and she said no, but that she was in therapy to try and understand how I could remain in a relationship with a man like him." OP says in a later comment, "I didn't mention this, but her initial reaction to my pregnancy also shocked me. I told her I was pregnant, and she said, 'Oh, don't worry, the abortion isn't that bad.' When I told her I was actually thinking of keeping the pregnancy, it felt like things were immediately off. 5 days later, she told me she no longer felt comfortable living with me, etc., etc. I remember, at one point, I said, 'It feels like you're giving me the choice between getting an abortion and having a place to live, or keeping my pregnancy and suffering financially.' And she said, 'No, I'm just asking you to take responsibility for your actions.' Then she told me I was making it very hard for her to self-advocate because I was acting like I was attacking her. I was like, is that not literally what you're doing?" Okay, friends, so that concludes our first story of the day. Next up, we have a story from the Stories subreddit. It was posted by SamePoet8990 on July 7th, 2025, and was titled, I think my wife's best friend is developing feelings for me, and my wife doesn't want to believe me because it's her best friend. Okay, yes, I'm aware I'm going to sound arrogant and like a narcissist. Get over it. My wife and I have known each other in total 20-ish years. We have dated for 9, married for 5. She has known her best friend, Dana, since the end of high school/early college. They are like sisters. Dana has horrible luck with guys, abusive relationships, toxic relationships. She's had it all and some. I know this because she vents about it to my wife and me all the time. Recently, she just got through a particularly rough relationship, and she decided she was no longer going to date and just be single for a while. She began making comments to my wife about how lucky she is that she has me, and it must make her feel so good to have a supporting, caring, loving man in her life to take care of her. This is when her changed behavior began. She has been very clingy to me. She never was before. When she comes over, head on my shoulder, sitting on my lap. She tells me all the time that I make her feel safe and comfortable. She always asks how my day is going and if I'm happy to see her, or how I think her body looks in her outfit, which she kinda did before, but now she draws attention to her feminine areas. A joke was made, by my wife, about Dana being my second wife to do all the stuff my wife doesn't feel like doing. Dana jumped on this and now refers too often enough as second wife. My wife thinks it's funny, and it was until Dana sent me a picture of a ring she wanted, because even your second wife needs a ring. I have brought all this up to my wife because I don't want to keep her in the dark about anything. And she just says things like, that's just her, or she doesn't mean anything by it. My fear is that Dana is getting what she's never gotten from any of her past relationships. Comfort, validation, safety, and that she would become attached to this sort of fantasy. I don't want my wife to think I'm doing anything behind her back. But, as I have stated, she just brushes it all off. Am I just being too observant, or is there something there my wife isn't seeing? Thoughts? Scaling Stories Corner. I think regardless if OP's wife doesn't care about it or not, if OP is uncomfortable with the way her best friend is acting, then she needs to support him in shutting it down. Personally, I've seen other people in other Reddit stories blow up at their significant other for the things that the best friend is doing to OP, like sitting in his lap and being called the second wife. Like, this is definitely crossing boundaries and is not respectful to someone else's relationship. If OP's wife doesn't shut it down, then he has to have a conversation with the best friend instead, like face to face. And if that nukes the relationship between his wife and her, then like so be it. Now here are some of the top/relevant comments from the original post. Commenter 1 says, as a female with a lot of guy friends, there's a huge difference in confiding in someone and then sitting in someone's lap. That, to me, seems like there's more to it. I'd chat with your wife and see where she stands with it. OP says she brushes it all off. I've brought up everything that has happened and left nothing out. Commenter 2 says, I think you're totally right. If you're uncomfortable, start putting her off your lap and saying things like, that's a bit much, Dana. Or start calling yourself her wingman and talk about which friends of yours she'd like to date. That should send a clear message. Commenter 3 says, I think the biggest issue here is that this person's behavior is making you feel uncomfortable, and no one who is supposed to care about your feelings appears to give a crap. Update 2 days later. First, I'd like to apologize for my post being removed from r/advice. I was never given a reason for its removal. Second, thank you for everyone's input/advice on my situation. On that note, there are some questions I keep seeing, so I will answer some below. Sitting in my lap. This has only happened twice. Both instances were at parties where there was no seating left where I was sitting. I actually offered her my seat, which she said thanks to and sat on my lap. Yes, both times were in front of my wife, and she thought it was funny, so rather than make a scene by kicking her off, I waited till an opportunity came. Needed more food/drink, bathroom, etc. Is she hot/am I attracted to her? By society standards, she would be very attractive. By society standards, my wife would not be as attractive. That being said, my wife is exactly what I want in a woman, just speaking physically at the moment. My wife is short, has very pale skin, long curly brown hair, and is not skinny because of the children we have had together. I love my wife the way she is, and we are working together to help her lose the baby fat she wants to lose. Dana, on the other hand, is taller than me. I'm 5'10", tan skin, straight, dirty blonde hair, and skinny. Again, attractive, just not what I'm into. Okay, now for the update. I talked to my wife about everything going on and my concerns about it, using some points people brought up in the comments. Turns out, my wife is aware of the situation and is actually partially behind it. Apparently, she brought up the idea of using me to show her best friend what to look for in a guy was a good idea, but it has gone a little farther than she thought it would. Forgive her, she had good intentions. So, we are both going to sit down with Dana and talk about everything next time she comes over. Second update, 2 days later. Firstly, thank you everyone for your good advice. This will be the last update to this crazy series of events. Now, let's get to what you're all waiting for, the update. Dana came over, we all sat down at the table, and the kids are at their aunt's for the night. I stated that I wanted everything to come out, all the cards on the table. I want to know everything. So this is what went down. Dana has always had awful luck with men. She vents to me and my wife about it all the time. During a conversation when I wasn't present, Dana had said something along the lines of, wishing she could find a man like yours, because she will never know what it feels like to be genuinely wanted and appreciated. My wife made a bad decision and, in trying to comfort her friend, suggested treating me more like a boyfriend than just a good friend. Nothing physical, just a support and comfort and validation for a little to get an idea of what to look for in a man. Dana said she was fine with that, but when she started to get it from me, she wanted more and started to cross boundaries to get it. The lap sitting, that kind of stuff. I asked my wife about it, and she said it caught her by surprise, but didn't exactly make her uncomfortable with her friend. It was actually the mentioning of Dana wanting a ring that she finally started to see that this was getting out of control. Wife said she realized she messed up, but didn't want to say anything to me about it. I explained to both of them very thoroughly about how ridiculous this entire thing is, how there are better ways we could have all helped, how this could have destroyed friendships and marriages. They should have come to me, and we all could have figured out ways to help each other together. There were apologies from both parties. Dana is still our friend, and she will be coming over in a few days for us to discuss how she can potentially work on herself and things to look for in men she has an interest in dating. My wife is very sorry to Dana and me about the entire thing. So, in the end, my wife made a mistake that she is remorseful for, learned from, and will come out better for it. Dana will have help working on herself and working towards a healthier future. And then there's me. Tired. And I want a beer, lol. Thank you again, everyone, for your good words and advice. I'm sorry if this isn't the outcome you hoped/thought/predicted, but life is unpredictable, and I'm glad this is over. Oh, and there will be no threesome, lol. Scaling Stories Corner. So I wasn't sure what to say in the last update, so I just skipped the corner piece because I had no idea what it meant when he said his wife was quote-unquote using him to show Dana what to look for in a guy. But I did think it was kind of weird to say that his wife is not attractive by society standards. I don't know. That just seemed kind of messed up to say about your partner. If that was me, I would have just said something like, yes, my wife is attractive, but her friend is also attractive. But whatever, you know? Besides that, after reading this update, I think I lost brain cells at what OP's wife was trying to do. And I did think that it was kind of disrespectful to do this to your partner and not even clue them in. Because that was like completely treating OP as an object and not as a person, because he was clearly uncomfortable with how Dana was interacting with him, but he was also anxious and afraid at the same time about how to handle the situation without blowing up the relationship between Dana and his wife, and also trying not to appear to be a cheater to his wife. But OP also said his wife was very sorry for what she did and he forgave her, so all is well. But I'm just saying, like, come on, you gotta treat your life partner better than that. Now here are some of the top/relevant comments from the update post. Commenter 1 says, many are saying he fumbled the three-way. Honestly, I think OP is a solid dude, and he handled it awesomely. Not everything on the internet is a plot of a porno. Commenter 2 says, holy crap, 3 people handling a situation like adults who make mistakes and genuinely want to love and care for each other in a respectful way and are committed to honesty and growth? Wild. Okay friends, so that concludes today's video. Leave a like and comment down below to let me know what you thought of it, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care. Also, do you guys think I read kind of too fast? Because sometimes I listen to myself on a playback and I'm thinking, okay, that's kind of fast. But then like I'm thinking in my head like, but that's how I normally read like at that kind of speed. But I don't know if it's like it's too fast. So let me know.